welcome back to MFA Writers. We've got a brand new conversation for you today, but before we get to that, I wanted to give a shout out to one of my favorite poets, Sasha McKinney, whose debut poetry collection, Joy Is My Middle Name, came out last month. Sasha was my guest on the second episode of this podcast, which still ranks up there as one of my favorite interviews ever. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to check it out. It was a lot of fun. And after you're done doing that, go grab a copy of her book. You won't regret it. You can find MFA Writers on Instagram and Twitter, as well as mfawriters.com. We love to hear from listeners, so feel free to shoot us a direct message on one of those platforms, or an email at mfawriterspodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a minute to rate or review the show, the best place to do that is on Apple Podcasts. Doing so will help boost our podcast as we try to boost these amazing writers. Also, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, you can apply at mfawriters.com. On that same website, you can also click the support button to support us financially, if it's within your means. Or you can do so by going directly to buymeacoffee.com/MFAWriters. Finally, as always, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. Welcome to MFA Writers, the podcast where we talk to creative writing MFA students about their program, their process, and a piece they're working on. I'm your host, Jared McCormick. Today I'm with Sophia Tone. Sophia is a second-year MFA candidate at Hollins University. Her focus is poetry, but she recently discovered the lyric essay and has been experimenting with creative nonfiction. She particularly enjoys writing intertextual and ekphrastic work. During her time in Atlanta with her best poet friend, she co-founded Peach Fuzz Journal, which seeks to publish emerging voices from the Atlanta area. You can find her work at HAD, Switch Microfiction, and Axel Poetry and Art. Today, Sophia has brought 2 poems to read for us.
Hi. Okay, so the first poem I'll read is called Thank You. My mother is in love with chandeliers. One of my 5th graders said that. Let's call him Jordan. None of the other children cared. They were busy eating Takis, accumulating interpersonal power. My heart quadrupled. People are insane frequently, but it gets pharmaceutical as you age. Even though, for example, our skin debris is all over the place. In upstate New York, on bong lips, inside your boyfriend's dog. Dead morsels of you everywhere, sneaky and very tired. I felt unruined. It's no secret. There are lots of things that are haphazardly terrific, and it is no one's job to know why. One day, on my off day, Jordan smashed his head into the glass of our classroom door. When I returned, everybody just walked over the pieces a little angry. I was proud. His head was so strong to do that. It didn't even bruise. This is the wrong reaction to have. But to me, it felt like a neon bird. Like eating ripe watermelon in 95-degree heat. As a mother, I would mostly gawk. Later on, we found out Jordan's mother doesn't even live in our town. She has lived in Maine his whole life. He just made that thing up about the chandeliers, which feels like a shard sitting brightly in the corner and nobody going to pick it up. Thank you. And then the second one is called Waste, a Montreal poem, and it was published about a month ago in HAD, which is an awesome journal that everybody should check out. So, Waste. Outside, my boots stiffen like 2 dead mice. Earlier at the Old Port Cafe, I heard a ravishing barista fret over milk. Soleil gonflé, on jette? Just wait till the end of the day, the other stunning one said. Bad answer. The distance got real wide. So much unblessed air. I got out of there, slogged over icy stone. Didn't meet any metro eyes. Eyes that meet cause war and marriage. Art says Helen had arresting blues, On the train, I watch two men invent a handshake. When they are done, they giggle. Then they watch the ground. Thanks.
Sophia, thank you. Those were both really great. It was so nice to hear you read them. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. Yeah, that first poem, thank you. I love that description of the like dead skin and the parts of our bodies and where it ends up and all these weird places and like
Yeah, it's freaky.
it is freaky. It's true, and that's what makes it freaky. And I feel like the descriptions that you have in your poem are so great. I really love the imagery that you come up with in both of these poems. That stands out to me when I read your poetry. And another thing that stands out to me is your use of French. And I want to talk about that a little bit. We'll get back to the
Yeah.
imagery, but I want to talk about the French because I know that you are originally from Montreal. And so I want to know what it was like growing up in Quebec and in what ways you think growing up there influences your work today.
Yeah. Well, so I actually moved to Montreal when I was like 2 or 3 from Atlanta. But so basically all of my childhood memories are in Montreal. And so I remember being like 3 and 4 and being really confused and not knowing how to like ask to go to the bathroom and stuff like that. And just like watching people speak this other language was kind of scary and stimulating, I guess, if anything can be that stimulating to a 4-year-old. But so I guess I remember the slipperiness of language very early and having to translate for my mother, who is a single mom and who didn't really speak any French. And so, yeah, some of my earliest memories are of translating French and it being important to understand. And so I think that has played a big part in my poetry currently.
Yeah. I moved abroad when I was like 24 years old and lived abroad for several years. And I remember that feeling of being in a country where I couldn't read any of the signs. I couldn't understand what anyone was saying. And it does like open you up in this really interesting way. But as a 4-year-old, I mean, you're already not totally understanding what the hell adults are talking about. So it's probably a different experience.
Yeah. I remember being kind of pissed off that, like, nobody could understand me or that I couldn't understand anybody else. I mean, yeah, I remember, like, sitting in a big circle at daycare eating this, like, wonderful food that they'd made for us, and it was, like, food that I'd never had before, and I just, like, didn't know how to ask for, like, forks and stuff like that. I mean, just very basic stuff, and I think was just sort of feeling lost. I think that, like, anytime you move to a place where you don't speak the language, it puts you in this very vulnerable position that is probably scary, but also helpful for, like, creative art purposes.
Mhm.
That's my theory, yeah.
One of the places I spent a lot of time in abroad was Barcelona. I lived in Spain, pretty close to Catalonia and Barcelona. I spent a lot of time there. And so in Catalonia, they speak Catalan. It's like very, I don't know, it's like this one section of the world that speaks this language. And it really affects the people there. They're really proud of it and they're really defensive of their language. And Quebec is kind of interesting in that way. It's like this one little section of Canada that speaks French. And I'm curious the ways that you saw the language affecting people there, the way they thought about the language, the way they thought about their culture, how it affected the art in Quebec. I'm curious if you saw anything like that.
Yeah, it seems to me that Quebec is probably very similar to Catalonia in that way. Quebec is very protective of its heritage, its like French heritage. And every like 7 or so years, there would be a referendum there where we would like decide whether to separate from the rest of Canada. So there's a very strong like separatist movement there. And so provincial like film, I remember was always being like touted and Québécois songs were very popular. Songs about Montreal in particular, I remember. Yeah, I think that most of the it's hard because I'm, like, losing more and more vocabulary the longer that I'm away, so I'm trying to practice as much as I can and, like, remember what we talked about in French, and a lot of what I remember is, like, schoolyard rhymes and schoolyard taunts and stuff like that, which is fun, and those are some of the things that I've been trying to translate into English because they sound really insane and silly when you translate them into English.
So, what's it mean to you, and what motivates you to use the French in your poetry?
I think that basically Québécois poetry is sort of unknown. I mean, even I don't know who the new popular Québécois poets are because I just think that they haven't been exposed to the level that like current France French poets are. Um, and like we all know about like Baudelaire or like Rimbaud and people like that, but I'm not sure if there are equivalents from really anywhere in Canada. Like maybe like we know Margaret Atwood, but I can't really think of a French Canadian poet who has that sort of esteem. So I guess it's important for me to have people when they read my poetry like realize that there is this whole special language and region in Canada that's still very alive and active, even though it's not getting the sort of recognition that I think it definitely deserves. Yeah.
Yeah, and even though you weren't born there, that place must have been huge for you, like formative years that you spent there. I mean, in many ways, you must identify with that place really strongly. So,
Yeah, I remember it just being cold for a long time and like really, really long winters and just sort of being inside alone. I think that probably led to the poetry in some way.
created the sad poetry personality traits.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all know
Yeah,
about
totally.
that. Okay, so after Quebec, you ended up in Atlanta. I'm curious to hear about that move, what that was like to go back to Atlanta, because it sounds like you were born in Atlanta and then eventually moved to Quebec. So, what was it like going back to Atlanta, and how do you think that affected your art and your interests?
Well, when I moved to Atlanta, I finally had friends and I wasn't alone and brooding all the time. So I think that actually I kind of stopped writing for a while, like maybe 4 or 5 years. I mean, writing consistently. And instead I just had a very like typical teenage high school experience. And I actually did a lot of video editing when I moved to Atlanta. I sort of like moved away from writing and into video editing. And I would make these like ridiculous cover music videos and feature my friends in them. And that was really low stakes, but like still a way to make art, I guess. And like looking back, video, like editing, particularly, I think editing film seems to me very adjacent to writing poetry. Because you're still choosing what images people are going to see and when, and like when they're going to get information. So I feel like it's all sort of adjacent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk more about your background in visual art and the way that affects your writing. But first, I want to talk about this journal that you started with your friend called Peach Fuzz. That was while you were in Atlanta. I'm curious how that came to be and kind of what the mission of that journal is and how you've seen that work affect your writing.
Yeah. Well, I had just graduated from Georgia State University with a creative writing degree, but I did fiction when I went for undergrad. I did fiction, and so I after that realized that I really wanted to encounter more poetry, and I wanted a community of poets, and I didn't really know where to find them. But then I met my best friend Mads, who was doing poetry at Emory at the time. And so we started hanging out and we were talking about how we wished that Atlanta had a better, a more intense, like, literary scene, 'cause it sort of does, but there are a couple open mics, but not to the extent that you'd think. So we got together and decided we wanted to start our own literary journal, and we especially wanted to show off, like, the voices of our friends and random people who hadn't been, like, exposed to big literary journals. So yeah, we got together in a park and decided that Peach Fuzz sounded both Atlanta and punk. And that's why we chose that name. And yeah, it's been really fun. We're getting our second issue together right now. It's been hard because we live very far apart.
Well, I love that you're highlighting emerging writers. That's something that I am always trying to do on here as well. So it's great to have other places where emerging writers can like get their work out there. So when that second issue comes out, where can listeners find it?
They can find it on our Instagram, which is at Peach Fuzz Journal. We're working on a website as well, but we have physical copies. We're fans of the analog, so we have physical copies too.
Who doesn't love to hold the journal in their hand, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So have you seen your own work influenced at all from working on that journal, like reading all of the work by emerging writers? Have you seen that affect your own work at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I don't know, people sometimes tell you to be cautious about, like, being an editor and being a writer at the same time because it can mess with your voice or something, but I think that it messed with my voice in a really cool, positive way. Um, I found that a lot of the work that people were submitting to Peach Fuzz was very sort of silly and contemporary in, like, a smart way, but lots of, like, found poems and lots of playing with form that I guess I hadn't been exposed to as much before, and so I think that reading all of these different voices allowed me to feel freer in my own voice and to be able to, like, experiment, and I'd say that my voice totally changed because of editing Peach Fuzz.
Yeah, I don't know who is discouraging people from working on journals when they're also writing, because, yeah, I'm a big supporter of getting experience working on journals. I think it can really improve your own writing and really change the way you think about your own work. So it's cool to hear that it did that for you. Okay, so let's go back and talk about that visual art a little bit. You said that you got some experience doing video editing. You saw the connections between that and poetry. How do you see the visual showing up in your work? How do you use your interest in the visual to enhance your poetry?
Um, it's a really tough question. I mean, I think what I like about paintings, for example, is that they are really quiet. They ask you to look at them and to pay attention, but they don't talk at you the way that, like, any other form of art that I can think about does, like films, or music, or stories or poetry. I mean, there's a voice that's, like, talking back at you or trying to involve you, whereas with visual art, when they're on the wall, it's almost like 2D, and there's still a dialogue, but there's something different about it that's really hard to put my finger on.
Yeah.
But I think that that's what is so exciting to me about ekphrasis is that it feels like basically impossible to transform a painting into words or vice versa. And so it's, like, never ending in a really fun way.
Don't you feel that with art, like any kind of art, if it feels like the artist is trying to tell you what to think about the thing, you bristle a little bit, right? It feels false. It feels less
Yeah.
satisfying. When you get the chance to look at something, whether it's a film or a painting or read something, and it feels like the artist is not preaching to you, is not telling you what to think, but is just showing you something and letting you determine what it means, that feels so much more satisfying to me. And I think with like, this is what I was thinking when you were describing it, with something like a painting, it's hard to be preachy in a painting, right? I guess there's ways to do it, maybe. But in some ways, it feels like the painting or the visual art is just naturally allowing you to come to conclusions on your own in a way that feels very satisfying.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. Like, this painting behind me, the still life, I mean, I don't know, still lifes are kind of boring, like, who knows what that means? It's a
Yeah.
painting of fruit, but I remember last summer, I was, going through some sort of, like, love problem or something, and I was trying to decide whether to go out and see this person, and I had this painting right above my bed, and it's in this huge wooden frame, and it's very heavy, and it's just a still life with, like, pears and grapes and old fruit. And I remember I was, like, very distraught over this person, feeling very dramatic, and then I thought about this huge painting right above my head that I felt like if it fell, it could kill me at any moment, and, I started thinking about the pears in the painting and how, like, delicate and vulnerable they were, and I don't know, I guess I started projecting, my feelings into the painting, and I felt very saved from the drama of the love problem I was going through. So
Yeah.
it was sort of like an escape from the real emotions of life.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's fantastic. And I think it's saying something about what art is really supposed to do, which is in some ways create some space for the viewer, the reader, the listener to bring themselves to the art, right?
Yeah.
You have to leave some space for the person who's taking in the art to create their own meaning, right? It's like a two-way street. And that's what's really interesting about rereading stuff, right? Like rereading stories 10 years later, and suddenly it means something completely different to you.
Yeah.
When a great writer, a great artist creates space for you to bring your own worldview, your own experiences, your own emotions in that specific moment to the work, the meaning can change each time you take it in.
Yeah. Totally. I feel like, Anne Carson is one of those people for me. Like, every time I read her poems or the glass essay, it's like, something new unlocks. It's
Yeah,
really cool.
something changes. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so you mentioned ekphrasis, which to me sounds like an impossible task to look at a piece of visual art and then translate that into a poem. Um, I'm curious to hear about your process when writing an ekphrastic poem. What does your process look like?
Um, I think it sort of depends. Like, with the poem I wrote about that huge painting that's sitting over my bed, it was mostly just me looking at the painting and deciphering it without any sources. But I have, another painting that I really admire called, Girl at the Window named Artiste Marcella, and it's by Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, who's a German expressionist painter. And in this painting, the painting is of a girl sitting on a couch at the window at night, and the outside of her window is completely blue, and you don't know what she's looking at, but she's sitting there with her head in her hand, and she looks kind of sad or maybe just, like, pensive or something, and it's really hard to tell what her expression is, um, and she really interests me as a character, I guess, in this painting, and so with that one, I did a lot of digging into the painter, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, and into the model, who it turns out was a real girl named Marcella or Franzi, depending on the source. And then the painting started to become even more interesting because of the questions, like, who was she? She was like a 10-year-old girl in all of the paintings that this group painted of her. And they were, this group of like 30-something-year-old men, and she was nude in a lot of the paintings. So then it's like it becomes really interesting to think about the ethics of the
Yeah.
painter versus the subject and all that stuff.
That's so interesting. And that makes sense to me how you might like first approach the painting and start writing about it just based on like your initial feelings towards it, but then using research to kind of open it up further. And it sounds like sometimes being surprised at the ways in which, your view of it might change once you start doing the research.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what I like about because those poems kind of also fall under creative nonfiction, I would say, because like this is a real painting. I mean, you can look it up. But I think that what's exciting to me is that the more research you do, the more questions appear. Like, it's not like you're finding this like conclusive evidence to completely describe what the painting is. You're like finding more holes in the story, and those surprises are better than the knowledge that you find while you're doing research. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay, so earlier you mentioned that as an undergrad, you actually studied fiction, but then you switched to poetry after undergrad and you pursued the MFA in poetry. I'm curious to hear about what motivated that switch and whether you knew you were going to pursue the MFA in poetry or whether there was some question whether you would pursue poetry or fiction.
Yeah, I did fiction for a few years, and basically the responses that I got from peers and teachers was that the motivation in my stories like didn't make sense, or like the motives that characters would need to like make the decisions they were making in my stories were non-existent or just like weird. And that really, they were totally right. Like, none of my stories really worked. But I guess I just slowly realized that I had a lot more energy for character and language and image than, like, I guess, motive or plot or something. Those things still feel really gray to me, whereas I really, like, always enjoy playing with language at, like, the smallest level, I guess. So I didn't know that I was gonna do an MFA. I think that I chose to do an MFA in poetry because I felt like I didn't know a lot about poetry, and I knew that I liked writing it and reading it, but I wanted to do more of that, like, as much as I could.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Having studied fiction as an undergrad and then switching to poetry, being like, well, now I want to be able to study this thing. So the MFA gives you a chance to do that. Um, so you ended up in the MFA at Hollins University, which is a 2-year, fully funded program located in Roanoke, Virginia. Best I can tell, the program offers tracks in fiction, poetry, and nonfiction, but it encourages cross-genre work. Was that cross-genre element appealing to you when you were thinking about Hollins?
Actually, no. I was so, like, fed up with fiction that I really just wanted to only study poetry, but I'm really glad that, the program does not allow you to do that because I never would have found creative nonfiction, for example, and I actually have learned to enjoy fiction again, so I think, it's a good thing to be cross-genre.
Yeah. So in what ways does the program encourage that cross-genre work, and how have you seen it affecting your poetry?
Yeah, there's a cross-genre class that you can take with this awesome professor named Matthew Burnside, and that class includes a lot of, like, film and, sort of web stuff and, like, even games, which is all, like, really cool and wacky, and actually, Matthew Burnside was a large part of the reason I wanted to go to Hollins because I read some of his prose poems, which I didn't have a lot of experience with and thought they were so cool, and I guess I didn't know you could do that, and, like, Thank You, the poem I read today, is definitely a prose poem, but then I also am kind of like, it's cool that you can call I mean, what's separating a prose poem from microfiction? I mean, it all sort of feels like whatever, like you're just calling things what you wanna call them.
Right.
Um,
Or a lyric essay, right? A lyric essay, how is that different from a prose poem?
yeah, exactly, exactly. And then when you go to Hollins, your first year, you take a class that they call seminar, which is a workshop class. But you have to write work not in your primary genre. So they force you to experiment, which is like hard and sometimes not fun, but super worth it, I think.
It sounds to me like working across genres has kind of changed the way that you view genre in general. It sounds like the lines between them are breaking down. Um, how important has that been to your development? as a writer. Do you see that affecting your work, affecting the work of other students in the program? Is it beneficial, do you think, for emerging writers to take down those barriers between genres and allow themselves to work between things? Because I'm sure, as you know, the publishing industry loves to like silo us off in like these little categories, right? So I'm always like curious how that affects our work, being forced to like only do one thing, or feeling like we're forced to only do one thing. In what ways have you seen that cross genre work and the breaking down of those barriers opening up the writers who are in this program?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I certainly wouldn't probably have found the lyric essay, for one, if I hadn't taken a creative nonfiction class. And that has been really an exciting form for me because it feels like it combines poetry and creative nonfiction. And I guess like my dad is a historian, and so I think I grew up really appreciating history and like doing research and sources and stuff like that. And so to know that you are actually allowed to put real life into your work in like a kind of explicit way with like sources and quotes and stuff like that, but then you can also interpret them the way you want to and put your own sort of art into those historical like resources is really appealing to me. And I think that other people in the program have also just switched their primary genres completely, which is something that you can do at Hollins and which is really cool. I have a friend who started doing only poetry and like pretty traditional poetry, and then is now a novelist. She's writing a novel, so that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I think when writers are given permission to follow their interests and not say, oh, actually, I'm supposed to be writing fiction and this is veering towards nonfiction or something like that, and then cutting themselves off and going in a different direction. When you're allowed, as you said, to just pursue whatever creative interests seem to come up in the moment when you're writing a piece, it allows for so many different avenues, and it really opens up the work, and it really allows for really interesting work in ways that I think is lost when we feel like we're forced to go in like one singular direction.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's important to, like, learn that you have permission, as you said, to do these weird things that are scary, but ultimately fulfilling.
Yeah. And I think it's great when an MFA program fosters that kind of sense of permission within the program, to figure out your voice, to figure out what interests you, to figure out where the energy is in your work, even if it doesn't fit into a perfect little category. So that's cool that Hollins does that. Hollins has been around for a long time, like 60 plus years. A lot of great writers have come out of there, including 3 Pulitzer Prize winners, which led to it being nicknamed Pulitzer University.
Really?
Yeah,
I
did you know
didn't
that?
know
I do that. Yeah,
that.
there are people in the literary community who call it Pulitzer U because so many Pulitzer Prize winners have come from this university. So you
Okay,
can start telling people that, Sophia.
yeah, I will.
So, in what ways, if any, do you think that long history influences the program?
Um, I think that it is cool and inspiring to, like, see Natasha Trethewey's name on the wall and stuff like that, but I will say that the program seems like it has always encouraged, experimental new voices, like, it doesn't feel like there's a traditional Hollins voice that you have to adhere to when you get into the program, which is really good, I think. Like, the school itself, the university is super old, and the university is older than the MFA program, so you're going onto campus with these really old buildings with, like, columns, and it's very beautiful and old feeling, but then the program itself feels very tapped into, like, contemporary literary culture, which I really appreciate, yeah.
Do any of those previous students, those writers who have gone on to great success, do they come back to Hollins very often to do like to give speeches or to as visiting writers, professors, anything like that?
Yeah, Natasha Trethewey in particular seems to come back at least a few times a year. Um, yeah, she's super awesome. She gave the first reading we had in my first year was her at the art museum, and that was a really cool introduction to the whole program.
Yeah, I bet. So in general, how is the sense of community in the program?
Um, I think it's great. It's very small. They only I think that, every cohort is maybe 10 people. So all in all, across both years, you'll have, like, 19 or so classmates. And so that just creates inherently a really small community. The program does a good job of fostering that too. Like, we have 3 or 4 readings a semester, which isn't a lot, but is enough, I think, to feel like we all belong together and to feel connected to poetry and fiction and creative nonfiction outside of Roanoke. Um, I don't know, people are pretty friendly. We get together outside of class quite a lot. We go to dive bars. Yeah, people like to hang out here, and it's Roanoke itself is, quite a small place and very gorgeous. Lots of, like, hiking and outdoorsy stuff, which I am not really into, but I like to watch people do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably a big change from Atlanta,
Yeah.
but, yeah, I was gonna ask what it was like living in Roanoke. It sounds beautiful.
It is so beautiful, yeah, and I've never lived in a place with this many mountains, and there's something really soothing about waking up and seeing the same mountains over and over, like, it's like they're these, like, grandfathers or something who are, like, watching over you, and they're always the same.
They're their own still life outside your window talking to you each morning, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and they're very undemanding, which I appreciate.
Alright, so let's talk about money a bit. As I mentioned, the Hollins MFA is fully funded, but it sounds like it has a unique funding structure. So what kind of funding do students receive in the program, and what kind of service are they required to do in return?
So every student gets about 10K over 10 months. So that comes out to about $1,000 a month. And I mean, it's nice that everybody is funded equally. Also, everybody is required to serve on this, like, it's sort of like a committee. There are maybe like 6 or 7 different committees that you have to serve on. They're called, graduate assistantships. And so what I did last year was I was part of the social media team, so I would go to readings and, like, record the speakers and upload stuff to Instagram. But everybody has a different role that they are required to do, and really, that comes out to be, like, maybe 2 hours of work a week. So it's pretty relaxed, in that way, and that's all you're required to do. You don't have to teach, but you can if you want to, and then also, the cool thing is, people can apply to get travel funding, which I didn't really know about when I was applying, but, you can apply to get, I think it's up to, like, $1,000, or it was last year, of travel money, and so you say where you wanna go and why it pertains to your writing, and then, if you apply, like, you'll get the money and they let you travel, which is cool.
So you said that if you want to teach, you can. How does that work? Do you apply, and then if you're accepted, do you get some extra funding? What does that look like?
Yeah, so there are 4 teaching slots, and you apply, why do you wanna teach? And then if you get the position, I think it's an extra, like, just a little bit over $7,000 a year, so then that bumps your stipend up from 10K to more like 17K, which is cool. And also, the class that you would be teaching is an intro to writing poetry and fiction class, so it's not a composition class, you're actually doing, like, a workshop class with undergrads, um, which was appealing to me. I'm excited.
Oh, so you're going to be teaching this coming year?
Yeah. I'll be teaching starting in September, and I'm nervous and excited. I get to create my own syllabus, so I get to shove whatever readings I want to teach down everybody's throat. And then I do poetry and fiction workshops with the students, and I will be taking them to the art museum as well.
I was just going to ask that. I'm like, how many paintings are you going to make them look at and write about?
That's the whole class. We just sit in silence and look at stuff.
Well, that's cool that you get that experience. I've been teaching for a long time, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. It's cool that Hollins has that opportunity available if you really want to get that experience. But it sounds like for most of the students, they'll be receiving that $10,000 stipend both years. There's not a whole lot of work that's required in exchange for that. That stipend is on the lower end, I would say, of MFA programs, but I imagine Roanoke is not the most expensive place to live. So how have you found that stipend? Have you been able to get by okay on that?
Yeah, it is on the low end. Roanoke is really cheap compared to the cities that I lived in. Like housing here, you can find, I mean, I live in like my own place for 900 a month, which I feel like these days is pretty good. And like food is cheap here. There's like fresh farm food to buy. So yeah, it's cheap living. But last year, I got a part-time job as an elementary school, like, teacher assistant just to make some extra money because, I mean, if I had only had the $1,000 a month, then I would've had, like, $100 of spending money, which isn't doable, but I would say that, like, the program isn't so intense that you can't get a part-time job on the side, because 'cause you're only going into campus maybe, like, 3 days a week, and so then that gives you some extra time.
Yeah, it's just something for people to think about if they're considering Hollins. If you go to another school, you might get a $20,000 stipend, but you might be teaching one or two classes a semester, and that takes a lot of time. So not having to teach those classes opens up your time. If you want to get a part-time job, you can kind of supplement that stipend. So it does kind of create a bit more flexibility depending on your financial situation.
Yeah, and I think that it, for me, has always been inspiring creatively to have a job that isn't really related to writing. Like I liked being an elementary school teacher. Kids are crazy these days, but it's like a different part of my brain was activated, and it's like the same when I've worked in restaurants and also been doing school. It's like you're exercising different parts of yourself, and then you actually have the space in your brain for the writing.
Yeah. Kids have always been crazy, Sophia.
No, not like this. I mean, that poem I read was real. Those things happened.
Crossing genres in that poem. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, it's been really nice chatting with you, getting to know you and getting to know Hollins. Before we go, what is one way in which the MFA experience has been different, for better or for worse, from your expectations when applying?
I think that I didn't realize how much fun I would be having. I expected the, like, serious craft conversations and all of the challenging parts, and those things are definitely there. But I also have just been able to, like, drive around and go to Taco Bell and make weird, like, animal noises with people I love, and so I've gotten really close to some people here, in silly, relaxing ways. So yeah, I guess I wasn't expecting that.
Well, that's great. It's always nice to hear when people find like a strong community in a program, they find their people. And yeah, writing should be fun. It should be fun to study it. It shouldn't just be torture, right?
Yeah, totally. I think that fun is required to have good writing in the future. I believe in that. Yeah.
Well, I'm all for it. I hope you continue to have fun this year. I'm excited to hear how your teaching experience goes. So keep me updated. I'm sure you'll love it. It'll be great and you'll be great at it. Thanks a lot for sharing your work with us and for chatting with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.